Today's Findlay Hancock County Memorial Day program is brought to you by the City of Findlay, the Hancock County Veterans Service Office, Allen Film and Video, WFIN, WKXA, and the Marathon Center for Performing Arts. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to this morning's Findlay Hancock County Memorial Day program. I'm Christina Mern, Mayor of the City of Findlay. The first official Memorial Day was recognized on May 30th, 1868, and although this year may feel different, its meaning endures. We honor those who accepted the highest call of duty by making the ultimate sacrifice while serving in the United States Armed Forces. We are in their debt forever. Memorial Day is always a day for somber reflection, and more so today, without a parade or crowds of friends and family waving their flags to lead for deeper reflection. Today is a service to honor those we have lost. So please take a moment to experience the program. Consider how blessed we are, and let it be a conversation starter with your family, friends, and neighbors, as we especially think of those who have given it all. At this time, the James J. McClellan 1148 Marine Corps League will present our nation's flag, lowering the flag to half-mast, symbolizing our nation's sorrow for those we have lost.
Detail, present, arms. Order, arms.
Please stand if you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance and the National Anthem. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Sheriff Michael Heldman, and the anthem will be performed by members of Findlay High School's Findlay First Edition.
Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free, land of the free, and the home of the brave.
Thank you. You may now be seated. We will now move to our traditional wreath-laying ceremony.
The wreaths were dropped in memory of our fallen soldiers and sailors and POWs who did not return from war. The Army is the main ground force of the United States. Its primary function is to protect and defend the country and its interest with ground troops, the Army Rangers, the Army Special Forces, and the Army Paratroopers. The Army is the oldest U.S. military service officially established by the Continental Congress on June 14, 1775. It's also the largest of the military services. Until 1947, the Air Force was a separate corps of the Army. The primary mission of the Army Air Corps was to support ground troop forces. However, World War II showed that air power had much more potential than simply supporting ground troops, so the Air Force was established as a separate service. The primary mission of the Air Force is to defend the United States and its interests via air and space. It operates fighter aircraft, tanker aircraft, light and heavy bomber aircraft, transport aircraft, and helicopters. Navy, like the Army, the Navy was officially established by the Continental Congress in 1775. The Navy's primary mission is to maintain and protect U.S. interests at sea in times of conflict. The Navy helps to supplement Air Force air power since Navy aircraft carriers can often deploy to areas where fixed runways are impossible. An aircraft carrier usually carries about 80 aircraft, mostly fighters or fighter bombers. Navy ships can attack large targets from miles away with very heavy guns and cruise missiles. Navy submarines allow stealth attacks on our enemies from right off their shores. The Navy is also primarily responsible for transporting Marines to areas of conflict. The Marine Corps. Marines specialize in amphibious operations. Their primary specialty is to assault, capture, and control beachheads, which then provide a route to attack the enemy from almost any direction. The Marines were officially established 10 November 1775 by the Continental Congress to act as a landing force for the U.S. Navy. In 1798, however, Congress established the Marine Corps as a separate service, while amphibious operations are the primary specialty. In recent years, the Marines have extended other ground combat operations as well as for combat operations. The Marine Corps likes to be self-sufficient, so it also has its own air power consisting of primarily of fighter and fighter bomber aircraft and attack helicopters. But the Marines do use the Navy for logistical and administrative support. There are no doctors, nurses, or enlisted medics in the Marine Corps. For instance, even medics that accompany the Marines into combat are specially trained Navy medics. The United States Coast Guard is the smallest of all the military branches. Was originally established as the Revenue Cutter Service in 1790. In 1915, it was reformed as the United States Coast Guard under the Treasury Department. In 1967, the Coast Guard was transferred to the Department of Transportation. Legalization passed in 2002 transferred the Coast Guard to the Department of Homeland Security in peacetime. The Coast Guard is primarily concerned with law enforcement, boating safety, sea rescue, and illegal immigration control. However, the President can transfer part or all of the Coast Guard to the Department of Navy in times of conflict. The Coast Guard consists of ships, boats, aircraft, and shore stations that conduct a variety of missions. It is also supported by the Coast Guard Reserves and a volunteer Coast Guard auxiliary in times of need. United States Space Force, USSF, is the Space Warfare Service branch of the U.S. Armed Forces and is one of the 8 U.S. uniformed services, the 6th and youngest branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. It was the first branch of the military established since the formation of the independent U.S. Air Force in 1947. The direct antecedent of the Space Force, Air Force Space Command, was formed on 1 September 1982 with responsibility for space warfare operations. The National Defense Authorization Act for 1920 redesignated Air Force Space Command as the U.S. Space Force and established it as an independent branch of the U.S. Armed Forces on 20 December 2019. The wreaths are laid for all of our military people that were lost in times of war. The wreath specifically was to designate the U.S. Navy because their fallen sailors were buried at sea. We have one wreath that is laid for the POW MIAs that have not returned home. We're laying these wreaths in memory of our fallen soldiers and sailors from all our wars and our POWs that haven't made it home yet. Ladies, lay your wreaths. If you want to support our veterans, support the following organizations: the American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Veterans or AMVETS, the Marine Corps League, the Purple Heart, Korean Veterans, and the Vietnam Veterans Associations.
Today's memorial service will be given by Nicole Coleman, Executive Director of the Hancock County Veterans Service Office.
What does Memorial Day mean to you? Well, I will tell you what it means to me. As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest form of appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. Memorial Day has always had a very significant meaning to me due to the long line of military service in my family. There is a small cemetery in Arlington, here in Hancock County, where that ideology began to take shape for my desire to join the military and be a part of something bigger than myself. It was a warm summer evening in 1980, and I was on a bike ride in Arlington. I decided to go out to the cemetery where the headstones of Tim Reinhart and Carl Brewster are. These were two of my dad's best friends who were killed in Vietnam before I was born. But I had grown up feeling like they were a part of my family. At that young age, I didn't fully understand the sacrifice that they had made, and the Brewster and the Reinhart families had no idea the impact their sons had on my life. I sat there in the cemetery as the tears rolled down my cheeks at the sadness I felt because my dad had lost two of his best friends and so many more. It is a small fraction of the population who is charged with keeping us safe and keeping our liberties intact. So how do we properly thank that group of people for their service and their sacrifices? How do we thank them for keeping our prosperity and our freedoms intact? It is interesting how different each generation of veterans respond to being thanked for their service. Our World War II veterans generally seem to receive the appreciation politely, knowing that they had just done their patriotic duty by fighting abroad. The Korean and Vietnam War veterans, too often overlooked, seemed genuinely touched when welcomed home and thanked for their service. For our most recent generation of veterans, who represent an even smaller percentage of our population than in previous wars, the gratitude is accepted, but many feel such a disconnect from their civilian peers. What is common throughout all generations of veterans, however, is the absolute insistence that the gratitude truly belongs not to them, but to our fallen brothers and sisters who paid the ultimate price for this country. This leads me to believe that the best way we can thank them is to honor their fallen and to care for their wounded brothers and sisters and to safeguard their families. I mentioned earlier that Carl Brewster and Tim Reinhart were two names that have always been an important part of that deep-rooted respect for me in Memorial Day. What I did not know was that some 30 years after that day in the Arlington Cemetery, I would get to meet Mrs. Juanita Reinhart. I discovered that she lived close to me, and so I wanted to go find her and introduce myself. Fear gripped me as I approached her door. It actually almost kept me from knocking. Would she cry uncontrollably? Would she be upset when I introduced myself and told her that I wanted to meet Tim's mom? That could not be further from the truth. While her eyes did fill with tears, her face lit up, and she smiled from ear to ear. She said it was nice to hear his name and to know that he was still remembered. At that moment, I knew I now have a deeper understanding, passion, and appreciation for the importance of honoring and remembering Memorial Day. But this is also a good opportunity for us to remember that we need to remember those fallen men and women every day throughout the year and to keep their names alive so that their families know their sacrifice was not in vain, and they are not forgotten. Warriors are selfless creatures. They fight as a team and as a family, and they look out for one another until their last dying breath. For those who never left the battlefield, we must hold them up in our hometowns and honor their memories. We should spend today reflecting on their service and sacrifice and live in gratitude each and every day for the precious gift they have given us. One way we can do this is by providing reinforcement for those who did come home to us. We respect the fallen by strengthening the programs and the services that our injured and ill veterans rely on. We must ensure they and their caregivers are properly supported. We thank our veterans by fighting for them when they cannot, by ensuring they and their survivors get the care they earned when they wrote that blank check, up to and including their lives. Memorial Day means, to me, that we have an annual reminder to honor and respect the men and women who paid the ultimate price, to thank their families by keeping their memories alive, and to continue to ensure that the warriors who came home have someone fighting for their rights and needs. Thank you for honoring this sacred day with our community. May God bless America and keep us safe.
At this time, please take a moment to reflect on Nicole's words as we enjoy a selection of music played by Patrick Sadowski.
The invocation will be given by Tom Smith, chaplain of the Hancock County Veterans Council.
I'd like to start our first with a poem written by a Findlay High graduate of 1980, a fellow classmate who also is a retired Air Force veteran. I won't hold that against him. Go Navy. Attention to orders, I thought I heard someone say, to welcome this veteran who has joined us today. Row upon row of stones stand tall, marking earlier members who had answered the call. On farms and cities, they grew up fit. They had a job to do, and they did it. The silence was broken as the procession went by, stopping in places where the intern will lie. The flag was folded, and I felt a great pride, believing those here, welcome to another side. Unknowns will thank you. I pray you were blessed. Now join your fellow warriors who gave us their best. And oh my, the stories you will tell. There at your final hail and farewell. And now the prayer. God of power and mercy, you destroy war and put earthly away our tears. that we may all deserve to be called your sons and daughters. Keep in your mercy those men and women who have died in the cause of freedom, and bring them back safely into your kingdom of justice and peace. We ask this through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please remove your caps for the 21-gun salute, followed by taps, played by Findlay High School senior Jordan Bechtel.
Memorial Squad, attention, hot! Firing Squad, port, home! Half right, peace! Ready, aim, fire! Ready, aim, fire! Ready, aim, fire! Present, home! Port, arm! Colors, right face! Column right, hope! Firing Squad, left face! Forward, hope!
Findlay and Hancock County have always been noted for their people serving in our wars. In World War I, we lost 60. World War II, we lost 159. Korea, 21. In Vietnam, 26 of our soldiers.
Thank you for tuning in to today's program. At this time, I would like to ask that anyone who is able to go outside of their home at 9:30 a.m. for a community-wide moment of silence. The end of the moment of silence will be signalized by the sounding of the county-wide tornado sirens. Thank you, happy Memorial Day, and be safe. Thank you for tuning in to today's program. At this time, I would like to ask that anyone who is able to go outside of their home at 9:30 a.m. for a community-wide moment of silence. The end of the moment of silence will be signalized by the sounding of the county-wide tornado sirens. Thank you, happy Memorial Day, and be safe.